There's a quiet moment that happens in every life, though most of us don't notice it at first. It's the morning you wake up and feel that small hesitation before you move. The mind says rise, but the body pauses, as if it's waiting for permission. For many, that moment arrives sometime after 60, when muscles that once answered instantly now take a little longer to respond. We tell ourselves it's just age. But what if that pause isn't a sign of decline at all? What if it's the body asking for a different kind of conversation? Modern science has begun to unravel something extraordinary. The human body, even past 60, isn't simply wearing out, it's negotiating. Every cell is listening for a signal, deciding whether to slow down or to rebuild. And those signals don't come from supplements or expensive machines. They come from movement. Not endless hours of strain, but precise, intentional movement that tells the body, you still need to be strong. Picture an older man standing by his kitchen counter, pressing his palms against the surface and leaning forward. His arms tremble slightly as he pushes back. Just another morning routine, it seems. Yet inside his muscles, a microscopic drama unfolds. Fibers stretch and shorten, calcium floods in, genes responsible for repair and growth flicker awake. In that moment, the body begins to rewrite itself. Researchers at several European universities call this the mechanical conversation. Every deliberate movement sends a message through the nervous system to bones, joints, and the cardiovascular network. When those messages are clear and consistent, the body doesn't just maintain, it adapts. And adaptation is youth, in its purest biological form. For decades, the standard advice for seniors was simple: walk more, move gently, avoid strain. The intention was good. But in protecting the body from effort, we may have accidentally silenced its most important language. Studies tracking thousands of adults past 60 show a startling pattern. Those who rely only on low-intensity activity maintain health for a while, then plateau. Those who include short bursts of structured, mindful strength work, what scientists now call functional tension practice, continue improving year after year. Functional tension practice is not exercise in the traditional sense. It's communication training. 5 foundational movements, done slowly, each lasting only minutes, yet capable of altering balance, blood pressure, and even brain chemistry. Imagine a woman in her late 60s performing the first movement, the wall push-up with hold. Her fingertips spread wide, palms press into a wall, elbows bend until her chest nears the surface. She holds 1, 2, 3, then exhales and pushes back. To an observer it looks minimal, but inside her shoulders and chest, signals race through muscle fibers, awakening motor units that have been dormant for years. Time under tension, the scientists say. But to her, it feels like returning home to a strength she thought she'd lost. Each repetition teaches the body to trust itself again. Within weeks, measurable strength increases by almost a third. More surprising is what happens in the brain. MRI scans show stronger connections between regions controlling movement and balance. The body and mind begin to synchronize, as if remembering how they once worked together. When people begin this practice, they often describe an unexpected emotion, relief. Not because the movement is easy, but because it's possible. Possibility has weight. It changes posture, breathing, even how a person sees their own reflection. The first time someone realizes they can push away from that wall with control and stability, there's a spark of recognition. I can still do this. The second movement builds from that spark. Sitting tall in a chair, feet flat, one leg lifts slowly until the knee straightens. A pause, then back down. The simplicity hides its depth. This small lift activates the hip flexors and quadriceps, the engines of walking. These are the muscles that let us rise from chairs, climb stairs, and move through daily life without hesitation. They're also the first to fade with disuse. When they weaken, balance falters. When they strengthen, everything changes. Scientists measure walking speed as a predictor of longevity. It's called the sixth vital sign. People who move faster, even by small margins, live longer, healthier lives. The seated leg lift is a quiet rebellion against the slow fade of motion. Each lift is a reminder, momentum can be rebuilt. After several weeks of consistent practice, participants report something subtle but profound. It's not just strength, they feel steadier, more grounded. The fear of falling, often invisible yet ever present, begins to shrink. Confidence returns step by step. Now the camera moves closer, capturing the fine tremor in a foot lifting off the floor. Muscles in the thigh tighten, the breath catches, the foot lowers again. A moment of rest, then another lift. Over soft music, a narrator's voice continues. This is how resilience is born, not in grand gestures, but in quiet repetitions that teach the body it is still capable of responding to challenge. The third movement brings the camera to the feet. Standing behind a chair, hands resting lightly on the back, heels slowly rise until only the toes touch the ground. A pause, then a slow descent. The body sways slightly. Balance adjusts. The calf muscles, often forgotten, become the heart's assistants, pumping blood upward with every contraction. Doctors call them the body's second heart. When they grow strong, circulation improves, fatigue decreases, and clarity returns to the mind. For many older adults, the first attempt feels wobbly. Ankles tremble, focus narrows. But with each session, the movement steadies. The balance sensors deep inside the inner ear, the vestibular system, begin to recalibrate. Each hold at the top is a micro-lesson in stability. Over time, these small victories compound. People find they can stand longer, move quicker, react faster to life's small surprises. A man in his 70s once told his researcher, "I thought balance was something you lose with age. Now I see it's something you practice." He was right. Balance isn't luck, it's learned vigilance. And it can be relearned at any age. From these 3 exercises alone, press, lift, and rise, entire neural networks light up, networks that tie movement to confidence and emotion. The brain releases dopamine and serotonin, natural reinforcers of habit. The simple act of showing up, of moving deliberately, begins to feel good. Not because it's easy, but because it feels alive. Across laboratories, doctors are beginning to understand what ancient traditions hinted at for centuries. Motion is medicine not just for the body, but for the identity that lives inside it. The way we move shapes how we think about ourselves. A person who can stand tall, who can push and lift and balance, starts to see themselves not as aging, but as evolving. And when you step back and watch a room full of people performing these small rituals, palms pressing a wall, legs lifting in rhythm, heels rising and falling, it looks less like exercise and more like meditation. The breath slows, faces soften, and for a few minutes, everything unnecessary falls away. What remains is presence. As we move deeper into this story, something fascinating begins to happen. The more consistently these gentle movements are practiced, the more profound their effects become. What starts as a series of simple motions soon evolves into a conversation between your body and your mind, a language of balance, coordination, and renewal. In one of the most illuminating follow-up studies from the University of Copenhagen, researchers noticed that after only 6 weeks of these targeted exercises, participants didn't just improve physically, their neurological efficiency changed. Scans revealed new patterns of brain activation that mirrored those seen in much younger adults. The scientists described it as reawakening dormant networks. Think about that for a moment. Each slow, deliberate repetition, each controlled breath and mindful hold, was actually lighting up the brain, reconnecting it to muscles that had been quiet for years. It wasn't just strength returning, it was communication being restored. The participants described something they hadn't felt in decades: stability. Not just the kind that keeps you from falling, but the deeper kind that radiates through every part of daily life. Getting up from a chair became smoother. Walking felt lighter. Even the simple act of standing still felt balanced again, centered. One participant, a 72-year-old retired teacher, described it this way. "It felt like my body remembered who it used to be." What's remarkable is that these transformations didn't require heavy weights, fancy gyms, or long hours. They required precision, the right kinds of movements, done with intention. And that's what this entire program represents. The science of aging well distilled into 5 movements that rebuild your foundation from the inside out. As the research deepened, scientists began to uncover the mechanisms driving these changes. It wasn't only muscle adaptation. Something subtler was at play, a process called mechanotransduction, where the mechanical stress of movement triggers a cascade of molecular messages inside your cells. These signals tell your body to repair, rebuild, and rejuvenate. In other words, every controlled push, lift, or hold is a signal, a command, for renewal. In the next phase of the program, the exercises begin to interconnect. The wall push-up that once felt simple becomes a stabilizing platform for the shoulders and chest, preparing you for daily motions like pushing open a heavy door or steadying yourself against the surface. The seated leg lift, once just about the thighs, begins to shape how you climb stairs, how you stand up, how you step forward into the world. Behind the scenes, your nervous system is adapting too. Tiny sensory receptors in your joints, the proprioceptors, become sharper, faster, more responsive. They send constant feedback to your brain about where you are in space, creating a loop of awareness that strengthens every time you move. This is why even slow, deliberate training creates such profound effects. The brain isn't just observing, it's learning again. And when the heel raises come into play, a quiet revolution begins in your lower body. The calves, often overlooked, act like hidden engines, pushing blood upward and keeping your circulation alive and strong. With each slow lift, the body's natural pump system reactivates, sending oxygen-rich blood back to the heart, to the brain, to the skin. It's no coincidence that participants reported clearer thinking and warmer hands and feet after just a few weeks. Then there's the balance challenge. At first, it's deceptively difficult, holding steady while your body sways and adjusts. But as the days pass, something extraordinary happens. The trembling steadies. The mind becomes quieter. The small, involuntary adjustments of your muscles form a symphony of coordination, each fiber working in harmony with the rest. In one fascinating experiment, researchers from Kyoto University used high-speed motion capture to track micro-movements during balance exercises. They found that experienced practitioners made fewer but more efficient corrections, evidence of a body that had learned calm precision. The scientists called it neuromuscular elegance. And this elegance spreads into daily life. Walking across uneven ground no longer feels uncertain. Reaching for something overhead feels controlled, natural. Even the simple act of turning your head to look behind you becomes smoother, because the muscles of the neck and spine are now communicating with the rest of the body in perfect time. The more we learn, the clearer it becomes that these exercises are not isolated actions. They are an interconnected system, a choreography of strength, balance, and resilience that rewires both body and brain. Doctors observing these transformations began to notice something unexpected in the blood work of participants. Inflammatory markers dropped. Resting heart rates improved. Sleep quality increased. Even cognitive tests showed measurable gains. Not because these exercises directly targeted those things, but because the body functions as an ecosystem. When movement improves, everything else follows. Now close your eyes and imagine this in slow motion. A man in his late 70s, steadying himself against a wall. His hands press into it. His arms engage. His breath slows. Each repetition is an act of defiance against time, a declaration that strength is not lost but rediscovered. Across the world, a woman of the same age lifts her legs from a seated position, feeling her muscles awaken, the weight of her limbs transforming into control. This is not fitness in the modern sense, it's longevity expressed through motion. Every muscle fiber that reactivates, every neuron that fires a little faster, every heartbeat that steadies, it all adds up. Over weeks and months, this becomes not just physical change, but psychological renewal. Because movement does something profound to the human spirit. It restores agency. It reminds us that even after 60, 70, or 80 years, the body still listens. It still responds. It still adapts. The Copenhagen study that began as a modest inquiry into fall prevention ended up revealing something much bigger, a blueprint for vitality at any age. When participants were asked to describe their biggest change, the most common answer wasn't strength or balance. It was confidence. The sense of being capable again, of trusting their bodies. And as we move forward in this exploration, the question isn't whether you can grow stronger after 60. The question is, how far can that strength take you? Because as you'll see, the body's potential for renewal doesn't stop with muscle. It extends to the heart, the brain, and even the way you experience the world itself. As weeks turned into months, something unexpected began to unfold. Participants who once joined the program to regain strength or reduce pain began to notice transformations they couldn't quite explain. Their posture changed first, shoulders drawing back, breathing deepening, gaze steadying. But then, something more subtle happened. Their outlook shifted. For decades, scientists believed the aging brain was mostly fixed, that after a certain point, its ability to adapt and grow declined irreversibly. But newer research, especially studies conducted at the Cleveland Clinic and the Max Planck Institute, has shattered that belief. They discovered that when the body moves with intention, when balance, coordination, and breathing align, the brain responds with plasticity. It builds new neural pathways, reinforces old ones, and even creates fresh connections between regions that once worked in isolation. Movement, it turns out, is one of the most powerful catalysts for neurogenesis, the creation of new brain cells. In one study, adults in their 70s who practiced these controlled balance and stability exercises showed increased gray matter density in the hippocampus, the brain's memory center. That's the same region that typically shrinks with age, leading to memory decline. But here, it was expanding. The participants weren't trying to train their brains. They were simply moving with awareness, following patterns that reconnected the body's left and right sides, challenging coordination and rhythm. But in doing so, they were restoring something deeper, harmony between movement and mind. This connection between the physical and the cognitive is ancient, though science is only now rediscovering its depth. In cultures across Asia, Africa, and the Mediterranean, elders have long practiced slow, deliberate movement, Tai Chi, yoga, traditional dance. These weren't just rituals of culture. They were neurobiological training, ways of keeping the body and brain synchronized long into later life. Modern neuroscience now explains what ancient wisdom has always known, that motion, breath, and balance form a single system. When one thrives, the others follow. The people in these new longevity studies began to describe sensations that echoed this truth. "I feel awake," one participant said. "Not just in my body, in my head." Another participant, 68 years old, shared how she'd begun dreaming more vividly again, something she hadn't experienced in decades. Scientists later linked these vivid dreams to improved slow-wave sleep, a deep stage of rest associated with memory consolidation and tissue repair. In other words, by moving during the day, she was healing during the night. That cyclical restoration is the body's most underrated superpower. Every deliberate movement during the day sends ripples through the entire system, influencing hormones, immune function, even the microbiome in the gut. When you move with control, your body releases myokines, tiny messenger molecules secreted by active muscles. These myokines travel through the bloodstream to organs, including the brain, where they reduce inflammation and boost regeneration. It's an internal conversation few people realize is happening, a dialogue between muscle and mind. Exercise, especially the slow, mindful kind, isn't just mechanical. It's biochemical poetry. Meanwhile, the emotional landscape of participants began to evolve too. Anxiety decreased. Mood stabilized. Feelings of isolation softened. The same Copenhagen researchers who measured physical outcomes began noticing psychological changes they hadn't expected. Those who performed the targeted movements regularly showed a 35% reduction in self-reported feelings of loneliness and a 40% improvement in what psychologists call subjective vitality, the internal sense of aliveness. This was not just about getting fit. It was about reclaiming the experience of being alive. When one of the researchers was asked to describe what he'd witnessed, he paused, searching for the right words. "It's as if movement rekindled the spark that aging had dimmed," he said. "It's a beautiful paradox. As we age, the world tells us to slow down, to move less, to be cautious. But biology tells a different story. The very act of slowing down, when done consciously, is what keeps the system alive. Not stopping, but moving with awareness. That's the secret. In one of the most revealing long-term studies from Harvard School of Public Health, older adults who engaged in mindful, low-impact strength routines like the ones in this program had not only longer lifespans but better health spans. The years of life spent healthy, mobile, and independent. The average difference? 12 additional years of high-functioning living. But beyond the data, there's something far more profound, the reawakening of trust between body and mind. You begin to notice it in the smallest moments. The steady control as you rise from a chair. The way your body instinctively finds balance on uneven ground. The breath that comes easier when you face a challenge. All of this leads to one conclusion that both ancient teachers and modern scientists now agree on. Longevity is not a number. It's a state of coherence, the harmony between movement, mind, and meaning. And when you cultivate that coherence, the aging process itself begins to change shape. Instead of decline, there's adaptation. Instead of fragility, there's resilience. Instead of fear of what's coming, there's curiosity about what's still possible. In this moment, imagine yourself watching someone who's practiced these movements for months. Maybe a neighbor, maybe someone you love. They move differently now. Their steps are quieter but more confident. Their hands don't tremble when they reach. They breathe deeply before standing. There's no rush, no panic. Just presence. That is what science now calls dynamic aging, the art of staying in motion, not to fight time, but to flow with it. And as this journey continues, the focus shifts inward, toward the systems that quietly determine how we age. The cardiovascular network, the immune response, the hormonal symphony that keeps energy steady and mood balanced. Because what's happening inside is just as fascinating as what we can see on the outside. Inside every human being, there's a silent rhythm, a pulse that has carried us through every moment of our lives. With age, that rhythm softens. The heartbeat slows, the vessels stiffen, the currents that once rushed through the body begin to flow more quietly. But through movement, even the gentlest, most deliberate kind, that rhythm can be reawakened. The simple act of lifting a heel, of pressing a palm into a wall, of drawing breath with intention, these are not just motions. They are signals. Each one tells the heart to open its valves a little wider, tells the blood to move a little faster, tells the cells that life is still happening here. In a groundbreaking study from the University of British Columbia, older adults who practiced slow, controlled resistance movements for just 15 minutes a day showed measurable improvements in endothelial function, the ability of blood vessels to dilate and contract. It meant their circulatory systems had become more responsive, more alive. The scientists described it as vascular rejuvenation. But there's another rhythm that begins to change too, one that governs energy, sleep, and emotion. Hormones. For decades, the decline of hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and growth hormone was treated as inevitable. But recent research has revealed a more nuanced truth: movement modifies chemistry. When muscles contract, they release myokines that interact with glands and organs, subtly recalibrating the hormonal environment. This is why participants often reported an unexpected sense of emotional steadiness after weeks of consistent practice. They weren't just stronger, they were calmer. Cortisol, the body's stress hormone, began to drop. Dopamine and serotonin, the neurochemicals of motivation and mood, rose naturally. The result wasn't euphoria, it was equilibrium. You could see it in their faces. A softness returning to the eyes. A quiet steadiness in the voice. For many, it was the first time in years they felt truly balanced, not only on their feet but within themselves. One of the researchers called it emotional homeostasis. It's a scientific term, but it describes something profoundly human, the feeling of coming back to yourself. And within that emotional balance, something else emerges: resilience. The kind that doesn't come from willpower or determination, but from biology. Because when your body begins to function as it was designed to, the mind follows. Circulation improves. Nutrients reach the cells more efficiently. The immune system begins to reset. Sleep deepens. Even skin tone changes. Color returns to the face. Warmth to the hands. These aren't miracles. They're physiology responding to motion. Deep inside the muscles, mitochondria, the tiny powerhouses of every cell, start to multiply. More mitochondria mean more energy, more endurance, more life in every movement. In laboratory studies, scientists found that older adults who performed consistent, low-impact training developed mitochondrial profiles resembling those of people decades younger. One participant, 79 years old, put it simply, "I don't get tired the same way anymore." It's easy to forget that fatigue isn't just about age. It's about communication, how efficiently your body turns fuel into energy, how your cells share that power. These slow, precise movements are like a tune-up for that entire system. They reteach the body how to generate and use energy cleanly. And as the physical body finds balance, the emotional body heals alongside it. Movement stimulates not only muscles but memory, the muscle memory of the heart, the emotional traces stored deep within. Each time you rise from a chair, hold steady in balance, breathe deeply into stillness, you're not just retraining posture. You're releasing history. The tension of years spent rushing, worrying, bracing against time, it begins to unwind. One afternoon, during a session filmed for the study's final phase, a woman in her late 60s began to cry halfway through a simple leg lift exercise. When asked what was wrong, she said, "Nothing's wrong. I just remembered what it feels like to be strong." That moment became emblematic of something researchers hadn't predicted, the emotional catharsis of movement. How the physical act of reclaiming balance and control also restores a deeper sense of dignity. For so many people, aging had meant surrender, giving up the freedom to move, to walk, to stand tall. But here, through slow, intentional motion, they were reclaiming it. And that reclaiming has ripple effects. Confidence changes posture. Posture changes perception. People begin to see you differently, not as fragile, but as present, engaged, alive. The psychological data supports it too. In follow-up interviews 6 months after the program, 82% of participants reported increased social engagement. They were going out more, meeting friends, taking walks, trying new things. Movement had opened the door, but what stepped through was connection. That's the part of the story the numbers can't capture, how motion becomes meaning. As the scientists observed, movement seems to act as a bridge between systems, physical, mental, emotional, even social. When one reawakens, the others begin to harmonize. This interconnected healing is what defines true longevity. It's not just about living longer. It's about living with coherence, every part of you working together, quietly, naturally, beautifully. And beneath all the studies, all the data, all the observation, one truth stands out: the human body never stops wanting to heal. It just needs the right invitation. A wall to press against. A breath to guide it. A motion to remember. And once that invitation is accepted, the transformation doesn't just continue, it accelerates. Because what begins as strength in the muscles soon becomes clarity in the mind, and then, something even deeper, a renewal of identity. The understanding that aging isn't an ending, but an evolution. That's where the journey leads next, to the stories of people who didn't just regain movement, but rediscovered who they were through it. People whose lives became proof that vitality is not a privilege of youth, but a choice of awareness. It always begins quietly. No grand gestures, no dramatic turning points. Just a small, almost invisible decision, to move again. To try. For one man, it started on a cold morning in northern England. The camera finds him in the half-light of dawn, a faint mist rising from the fields behind his cottage. His name is David. 74 years old. A retired railway engineer. For decades, his life had been defined by movement, steel, locomotion, precision. But after a fall 2 winters ago, he'd stopped moving altogether. Fear had crept in. The stairs became an obstacle. The garden, a memory. The first time he tried the wall press, he said it felt like pushing against the weight of time itself. His arms trembled, not from weakness but from uncertainty. Yet he kept at it, one repetition at a time. A month later, when he walked outside to the edge of his garden and back, he smiled, almost in disbelief. "It's strange," he said softly. "The world feels bigger again. There's something universal in that moment, when movement gives you back the world." Across the ocean, in Kyoto, a woman named Hannah had a different story. Once a dancer, she had spent her youth in motion, disciplined, graceful, tireless. But after years of desk work and caretaking, her body had stiffened, her balance had faded. She joined a local community group where these same gentle exercises were being practiced in a small studio above a tea shop. At first, her movements were cautious, mechanical. But over weeks, something old began to return. The tilt of her shoulders, the rhythm of her breath, the quiet elegance that had never truly left her body. One evening, after class, she stood at the open window and lifted her arms into the air. The teacher watched her in silence. The way she moved was no longer just practice. It was memory made visible. For Hannah, the transformation wasn't about strength. It was about reclaiming grace, the right to move beautifully, even at 70. In another part of the world, in a modest apartment in Sao Paulo, a widowed grandmother named Selena began her journey for a different reason. Her doctor had warned her about declining bone density and suggested gentle resistance work. What she found instead was a way back to herself. Each morning, she'd pull a dining chair into the center of the living room. No music. No audience. Just the sound of her breath. She'd lift her heels, stretch her legs, reach for the ceiling. Her grandchildren started joining her, laughing as they copied her moves. In one of the recorded interviews, Selena says, "They think we're playing, but I'm building my future." There's a quiet dignity in those words, a reminder that movement at this stage of life isn't vanity, it's legacy. And yet, behind these stories, the science continues to whisper. Researchers analyzing the footage of these participants began to notice patterns. The longer people practiced, the more fluid their movements became, less force, more control. It mirrored what neuroscientists call motor refinement, the brain learning to move with economy, elegance, intelligence. That efficiency, they discovered, wasn't limited to movement. It extended to thought. Participants reported clearer focus, sharper recall, steadier moods. The line between physical and mental resilience blurred completely. Back in the lab, when scientists studied blood samples from long-term participants, they found elevated levels of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a molecule often described as fertilizer for the brain. It's the chemical that encourages neurons to grow new connections. That's what was happening beneath the surface. Every slow press, every controlled lift, was fertilizing the mind. But science can only explain so much. What it can't measure is the emotion that blooms when people realize they're not broken. One afternoon, during follow-up filming in Copenhagen, a man named Eric, 82 years old, was asked what the biggest change had been for him. He paused, eyes filling with tears, and said, "I stopped apologizing for my body." That single sentence seemed to capture everything the data couldn't. Because that's what renewal truly is, not just the restoration of strength or balance, but the restoration of dignity. As these stories unfolded, a pattern emerged across continents, cultures, and generations. The details differed, but the arc was always the same. Loss, hesitation, discovery, return. In South Africa, a group of retired teachers practiced together under the open sky, laughing between movements. In Sweden, a small community center filled with the sound of chairs scraping as a dozen older adults lifted, pressed, and balanced in unison. In New Zealand, a husband and wife who had both suffered mobility issues began practicing side by side each morning, counting softly under their breath. In every country, the same quiet revelation was happening, that age does not end movement, it refines it. As the documentary lens widens, we begin to see the collective rhythm of these lives, a chorus of motion echoing across time zones and languages. Each participant moving differently, yet connected by the same invisible thread, the will to stay alive in every sense of the word. The narrator's voice lowers, almost to a whisper. Somewhere deep down, the body never forgets how to heal. It waits for the invitation, a movement, a breath, a decision to begin again. And when it does, something miraculous, yet entirely natural, begins to happen. The body follows the mind, and then, the mind follows the body back. Across these stories, you begin to see it in their eyes, that quiet light that returns when people rediscover what it means to trust themselves again. That's the real science of longevity. The chemistry of hope. Because in the end, it isn't about defying age. It's about meeting it, with grace, strength, and awareness. There's a quiet moment that always comes near the end of these stories. The camera lingers. No one speaks. You can hear the sound of breathing, the subtle rhythm of movement, the rise and fall of a chest, the creak of a floorboard, the whisper of air through an open window. And in that silence, something becomes clear. This was never about exercise. It was never about muscles or measurements or minutes logged. It was about remembering what it feels like to be alive, fully, presently, gracefully alive. The human body, even after decades of wear and loss, still holds this capacity for renewal. Every cell, every tendon, every breath, it all carries the story of survival. Scientists can chart the mechanisms, map the pathways, identify the molecules. But what they can't quantify is the will that drives it all, that small, persistent spark that says, not yet. That spark is what moves through all of us. It's what allows a man like David to step back into his garden without fear. It's what lets Hannah raise her arms again to the sky. It's what brings Selena's laughter into her living room every morning. And it's what turns movement into meaning. The studies continue. More universities, more labs, more data. But beyond the numbers, something profound is happening. The narrative of aging itself is being rewritten. For too long, aging has been portrayed as a slow surrender, a steady retreat from vitality, from participation, from joy. But what these stories reveal is the opposite. Aging, when met with awareness and motion, becomes a deepening, a refining, a return. Doctors now speak of functional longevity, the ability to live not just long, but well. Yet beyond the terminology, the truth is simple. The more you move with intention, the more life responds. In the quiet pulse of blood rediscovering rhythm, in the muscles relearning their purpose, in the brain forming new connections, you begin to see that life was never gone. It was waiting. Waiting for movement to wake it again. The camera moves slowly through each setting, a kitchen, a garden, a studio, a quiet park at sunrise. The people we've met along the way appear once more, moving in slow, deliberate rhythm. Their faces calm. Their eyes steady. You can feel it. The weight of time hasn't disappeared. It's simply been transformed into wisdom, into grace. And then the narration lowers, almost to a whisper. This is not a miracle. This is biology, responding to care. This is what the body was designed to do, to adapt, to recover, to thrive. When you move, you speak to your body in its oldest language. You tell it, I'm still here. And it answers, so am I. Movement becomes a conversation, a dialogue between past and present, between strength and softness, between effort and surrender. In one final interview, a participant, 84 years old, sits by the window as evening light spills across her face. When asked what she's learned, she smiles and says, that getting older isn't the end of movement. It's the beginning of understanding it. That sentence carries through the final images, the rhythm of feet stepping across stone paths, hands pressing gently into a wall, breath meeting light, motion meeting stillness. As the narration deepens, the film shifts from the personal to the universal, a meditation on what it means to inhabit a human body, to experience time not as loss, but as transformation. Every wrinkle, every scar, every tremor tells the story of movement that has already happened, a lifetime of gestures, of touch, of motion. The body is not failing, it is remembering. And in that remembering lies freedom. The studies, the data, the testimonies, they all lead to the same conclusion. Movement is not just exercise. It is memory. It is medicine. It is meaning. Somewhere, someone is standing for the first time in weeks. Somewhere else, a hand reaches up, a spine lengthens, a breath deepens. These moments ripple outward, invisible, ordinary, miraculous. Because the truth is simple, and it's what this entire journey has been trying to say. You don't stop moving because you grow old. You grow old because you stop moving. But the moment you begin again, the instant you choose motion over stillness, time shifts. Not backward but inward. Toward presence. Toward life. The music swells, quiet piano, the faint echo of strings. The camera drifts upward, toward light. The voice continues softly, almost like a secret being shared. Maybe this is what longevity really means, not escaping time, but learning how to move through it with grace. In the end, we don't measure life in years, but in motion, in every breath drawn, every step taken, every time we decide to rise once more. And somewhere in that rising, we discover what it truly means to be alive. The screen fades to soft light, not bright, but full of warmth. A whisper of movement, the sound of wind through trees, the rhythm of a heartbeat that's not rushing, just steady. The kind of stillness that feels alive. The narrator's voice returns, low and calm. There's a moment at the end of every journey where everything slows. The noise quiets. The research, the numbers, the explanations, they fall away. And what remains is simple. The miracle of being here. For decades, we were taught that aging meant decline. That every passing year was a subtraction, less strength, less memory, less possibility. But the truth that's been revealed through every study, every movement, every story you've heard tonight, is that aging is not subtraction. It's accumulation. It's the layering of wisdom over time, of patience over effort, of breath over breath. The people you've seen, the hands, the faces, the movement, they are proof that the human body is not fragile. It is responsive. It listens to how you treat it. It listens to what you ask of it. When you rise from a chair, when you stretch toward a wall, when you lift your heel or hold your balance, those moments are not small. They are conversations with time itself. You are telling your body that you still belong to the living. And your body, no matter your age, no matter the story it has carried, answers back, I am still capable. I am still here. The camera drifts slowly through the lives we've touched. The man walking barefoot through his garden, the woman standing in the morning light, her arms open as if to greet the day. Faces marked by years, yet radiant with something deeper than youth. Movement becomes memory. Memory becomes meaning. And meaning becomes the thread that ties every human life to another. Scientists may describe it as muscle activation, balance, proprioception. But when you see it, when you feel it, you know it's something more. It's courage. It's defiance. It's grace. We spend so much of our lives running towards strength, chasing youth, fearing loss. But perhaps true strength isn't measured in how much we lift, or how far we run, or how fast we recover. Perhaps it's measured in the willingness to keep moving forward, even when time pulls us back. Because the miracle of the body is not that it endures forever. It's that, even now, it remembers how to begin again. A soft piano note lingers. The screen fills with the faces of ordinary people, walking, breathing, living proof of resilience. The voice grows quieter. The body will change. The world will keep moving. But inside every one of us, there remains something untouched by age, the desire to reach, to stretch, to rise. And that desire, that spark, is what keeps life alive. So when morning comes, and your feet touch the ground, remember what you've learned here. You don't have to chase time. You don't have to fight the years. All you have to do is move. Move gently. Move often. Move with purpose. And let every step remind you, you are still becoming. The music swells, one final crescendo. The screen fades to white. And over that stillness, one last line. Aging is not the end of movement. It is the beginning of understanding it. The credits roll.